Hi book nerds, I'm Jen, and this is my July wrap-up. July was an interesting month. It was my last full month before I go back into the classroom for teaching. In fact, I have 1 week until I am back with my students. The summer just flew by, but July was a great month, not just for reading. July was the first month of HRCYED 3.0, which is a reading challenge that I'm doing for the next year. I do have another video about the HRCYED, and if you're only here for HRCYED content and you don't care about the books that I read or what I thought of them, you just want to know what prompts I used them for, you can skip ahead to this part of the video, and that's where the HRCYED stuff will start. No hard feelings if you don't care about what I thought about what I read. And also no hard feelings if you stop the video before the HRCYED content, if that's not your cup of tea either. So in the month of July, we took a week vacation at Disney. That was a lot of fun. We rode some rides that we had never ridden before, Guardians of the Galaxy and Tron. We spent a lot of time on the lazy river, and I actually did get a lot of reading done during that week. Also in July, I participated in a Harry Potter trivia, and my team came in 4th place. We were the Nasty Nifflers. However, later, we found out that the 1st place team cheated, so really we got 3rd place. And I also got a sorting hat latte at the local coffee shop. Unfortunately, it sorted me into Gryffindor when I am actually a Hufflepuff, but that's okay. If you're interested in seeing anything about the trivia or about the latte video, you can visit my other social medias, which are in the description below. As far as reading goes, I read 10 books with an average 4-star rating. And about half of the books that I read were on audio or a mix of reading physically and reading on audio. There is no way that I would be able to read 10 books in a month if I didn't listen to some of those books while I was driving or cleaning or playing on my Switch. In addition to all of the books that I finished, I am also reading Dungeon Crawler Carl 7, and I only got this far, so I have this much left to go. So this will be finished hopefully within the week, but it will be in my August reading wrap-up. So I'm going to talk about the books in the order that I read them, because that's how I have them written down, and that just makes sense in my brain for this month. The first book I read was on audio from Libby, and it was the Book Club for Troublesome Women. This was not a book I had planned to read in the summer or in July. It just happened to come up in my Libby app, and I had room for an audiobook. So I picked it up, I started listening to it. This is about a group of women in the 1960s who form a book club. And at first, it seems a little bit gossipy. They kind of spill the tea at these book clubs. But the more that you read, the more you see the things that these women are facing in their lives because they're women. And the book that they chose to read for their book club, for their first book club pick, was The Feminine Mystique. And I don't know anything about that book. I've never read that book. I think it's a real book. But it sort of opened their eyes to the way that women were treated compared to the way men were treated in their time period. For example, one of the women goes to open a bank account because she has her own job. She is not able to do that without her husband's permission. Overall, I felt like this book was pretty emotional at the end, and I did rate it a 4.5 stars. Next was the book that I read for my monthly book club, my in-person book club, and that was Metal Slinger. This one has been on my Kindle for months. The only thing I knew about it was that it had a surprise ending, and because the book club was reading it, it was time for me to read it as well. So here is the tricky part about rating this book. For most of the book, it was a 3 to a 3.5 stars. There was a time period in the book that, to me at least, it felt like they were in this one setting for a very long time. When they finally got out of this setting, I was super relieved. I was tired of reading about that setting. It was slow. Nothing new was really happening. And then pretty soon after they got to where they were going, the first surprise dropped. And it was definitely not something that I saw coming. So that made me feel like, okay, all right, I can get back into this book. Bumped the star rating up to about a 4 at that point. I was enjoying it. I liked the story. I liked the magic system. I liked the romance. The last 2 chapters of this book, to say that I didn't see it coming would be an understatement. My jaw was on the floor. Biggest surprise in a book that I have read in a long time. Overall, I gave Middle Slinger a 4.5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. I did already start Light Wielder, which is the second book in the series, so that will be in my August wrap-up. Then I read Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. I put this on my July TBR because of Summerween. Even though I didn't read it during Summerween, I had all the plans to participate in Summerween. It just was not a good week for me to be making content and reading the books that I had chosen for Summerween. But I still did want to read it. It was the first book I had ever read by Chuck Tingle. And I'll just tell you this. If you have any sort of religious trauma, you might want to stay away from this book or do your research before you start reading. I gave this book a 4 stars, very solid. It is a horror book, and I don't generally read horror books, but this was not a scary horror book, in my opinion. Yes, it does have something to do with demons and hell and a gay conversion camp, but there was no point in the book where I would not have been able to read it home alone in the dark. Overall, I really liked it. I do have another book on my TBR by Chuck Tingle, and as a first book by this author, I really enjoyed it. Next, I finished up the duology of The Shepherd King duology with 2 Twisted Crowns. I read One Dark Window in June. I'm really trying to read series closer together. This summer is when I really started trying to buckle down on that. Which is why for August, I chose to mostly read books that were continuing series. I think that this duology as a whole is super solid. I really, really liked it. This was my first foray into Rachel Gillig. I have not read The Night and the Moth yet, but I will very soon. I did rate both of these books 4 stars. I liked the second book a little bit more. There was a little bit more romance. There was a little bit more emotion. There was a little bit more action. But overall, both books were very, very close. I didn't like one a whole lot more than I liked the other one. So yes, I would recommend The Shepherd King duology for sure. All right, the next one is a book that I was so excited when I found because I go thrifting a lot. And when I find a book that I like, great, cool. I found a book that I wanted for like $2. But when I find a book for $2, $3 that is currently on my Amazon wish list, that enjoyment level just skyrockets. In fact, it happened to me this week with The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, but this book has nothing to do with what I read in July. But the book I'm talking about is The Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. So I have read quite a few books by T. Kingfisher. I have not loved anything that she has written, but I have liked it. But this one was on my radar because it is middle grade. I teach middle school. I was like, oh, maybe I can read this or recommend this to my students. So I did read it. I read it and listened to it. And I gave it a 3.5 stars. It was cute. There were some parts of it that I felt were kind of boring. I think that if I were a middle grade reader, I would have rated this higher. But as an adult who primarily reads adult fantasy, obviously I did not enjoy this book as much as I have enjoyed other books in the past. But I think a 3.5 stars is pretty solid. If I could choose one word to describe this book, it would definitely be cute. And in the light of continuing series, I did read the 4th volume of Emma M. Lyon, The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. If you do not know what this series is, it is currently an 8-book series, but I think it's going to be 22 books. The books start out very small. The first book is really small, like barely over 100 pages, I think. And the entire book is written in epistolary form, meaning completely in diary entries. So even when the books get longer, it does not take a long time to read because the diary entries don't always take up a full page. This is about a young woman in her early 20s living in the 1800s in London. It's about her friends and the people that she meets. And I'm going to have to say that this 4th volume is my favorite one so far. I rated it a 5 stars. There is really no romance yet, but there are 3 options that you can see for potential romance. This book concentrated more on the friendship, this friend group. It was like a found friend group between Emma M. Lyon and these 3 men. And I love their friendship. I love how they're always there for each other. They show up for each other no matter what. They always can tell when somebody in their friend group is in need and they just show up. Needless to say, the series, for me at least, is getting better as it goes. The next one I picked up because it was available instantly on Libby. It was short, and I just needed something to listen to for the day. So I picked up The River Has Roots. This was not a book I was ever planning to read, but I'm really glad that I did. I did only end up giving it a 3 stars. I think it took me like 3 hours to listen to on audio, and I'll tell you this. If I would have picked this book up physically and read it with my eyeballs, I may have DNF'd it, or at least trudged through it because it is a very short book, but not really enjoyed it. The writing is very flowery, which is great, but I don't always care for flowery writing. However, because I listened to this on audio, it was beautiful. There was music, there were voices. The tempo at which it was read fit the writing perfectly. Overall, this was just a beautiful book to listen to. I don't know that it would necessarily have been a beautiful book to read, but I do know that it has gotten a lot of awards. It's on a lot of top lists. Would I recommend this book? Probably not, unless it was on audio. But because it is such a quick read, you're really not out anything to just give it a try. The next one that I read was Abby Jimenez, The Night We Met. And I have seen a lot of bad reviews on this book, not necessarily because the book itself was bad, but because people don't like the trope, which was boyfriend's best friend, which I totally understand people's thoughts on that and people's opinions and people thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to go there. However, it's just a book. Okay, it's not something I would ever do, so it's just a book. It's not a book about me. But yes, it is boyfriend's best friend, but it's done so well. You would think that a book that is about a girl falling for her boyfriend's best friend, you might have negative feelings about that girl. Like, I would never do that. I can't believe she would do that. But everybody involved did it very tastefully. They were very respectful of other people in the relationship. It was not something they went into lightly. In fact, it was over a year before anything happened with the girl and the boyfriend's best friend. And they tried so hard. They did not touch each other. They did not talk about it. They weren't in the, they weren't alone together if they could help it. I think it was done very, very well. I like Abby Jimenez's romances because I feel like they're written for adults because yes, they talk about sex. Yes, they have sex, but it's not descriptive. The whole relationship is not about sex or the first time they bone. It's about deeper issues. It's about real grown-up shit that we go through. I would check your trigger warnings for this one. There are trigger warnings at the beginning of the audio at least, but overall, I gave it a 4.5 stars. I really, really liked it. The last 2 books I read were both novellas. On July 28th, Amazon released, I think it was 6 books, 6 fantasy novellas by different fantasy authors. I am going to definitely read all of them. I am going to also make a video on my thoughts on all of them. So I'm not going to go into extreme depth here. I will probably read the last 4 in August and then post the video at the beginning of September. But I did read The Wizard Who Kept Himself Suspicious by Scott Lynch. I gave that a 3.5 stars. And then Travis Baldree wrote Miss Gentle and the Case of the Very Flat Monk, and I also gave that 3.5 stars. But if you want my full thoughts on those books, which really isn't a lot because they're novellas, go ahead and check out the video that I'm going to post probably at the beginning of September. So that is all for my July reading wrap up. Let's move on to HRCYED. And if you are not interested in my HRCYED stuff, well, thank you for listening as long as you did. I appreciate all of your likes, your comments, and your subscribes. All of my socials are in the description below, and happy reading. If you are here or are interested in HRCYED content, let's go, because I had such a good time reading for HRCYED. The whole time that I was reading, I had these prompts like filtering in my head, like, oh, I could read this for this, or oh, I could read it for that. And now whenever I look at a book, I'm like, oh, what prompt would that fit? Like, I'm having such a good time. And I know that this readathon is a lot, and I know that it is a whole year, and I just hope that I can keep up this enthusiasm and this momentum all year. Now, my strategy going into HRCYED is from now until the end of December, I'm just going to stick with my TBR. I'm going to read like I normally would, and then I'm going to fit the books into the prompts wherever they fit. From January to June, or I guess through June into July, stopping in July, I'm going to be a little bit more strategic. I'm going to start picking books specifically because they fit prompts, books that were not necessarily on my TBR, which is the whole point of HRCYED anyways, to try to get you to read outside of your comfort zone. So let's talk about where I put the prompts for the books for July. Let's start with my birthday month. So I was born in April. Here's the graphic for that prompt. I chose the book club for Troublesome Women to fit in the published in April spot. And I picked The River Has Roots to fit in the tree spot. My tree, the birthday tree, the April tree, is willow. And there are willows and a lot of talk about willows. And willows are an important part of The River Has Roots. So I did put that for the birthday tree. So let's move on to the next prompt, road trip. And in this prompt, you put books that take place in different cities around the United States, or in different states around the United States, as long as it's not in California or New York. Book Club for Troublesome Women fit in the Virginia spot. And The Night We Met took place in Minnesota, so I put that in the Minnesota spot. Now let me tell you, these may not always be in this spot. If I find another book that fits into one of these spots, but I have the prompt already filled up, I may take one of those books off that prompt and fill a slot that needs to be filled. So my end of HRCYED prompt list might look a little bit different, but who knows? This is the first time I've done HRCYED. All right, moving on to I Must Endeavor to Catch Them All, or whatever that one is called. This is where you have to read books with characters or titles that match up with the different types of Pokemon. So I only filled in one spot for this month, and that was Metal Slinger for Steel type Pokemon. I also put Metal Slinger in the Choose Your Party prompt. So the Choose Your Party prompt is to find books where the characters match different classes for D&D. I'm a big D&D fan. This is my D&D shelf. I am currently playing a gnome druid. But for this instance, I did put Metal Slinger in the spot for fighter. And the Wizard Who Kept Himself Suspicious, obviously I put him in the slot for wizard. So I have fighter and wizard. And then the last spot that I filled in for this prompt was Miss Gentle and in the Case of the Very Flat Monk. And I chose to fill this spot for cleric. All right, moving on to the prompt where you have to have books that have different animal families on the cover. And this does not mean 5 books with 5 different types of dogs. These are 5 completely different animal families. So for this one, I chose Camp Damascus because it has insects on the cover. And I chose The Night We Met because it has a dog on the cover. The next prompt that I have spaces filled in for is biomes. I chose Camp Damascus for forest on the cover. And I chose The Wizard Who Kept Himself Suspicious for an ocean biome. Okay, here's where I had some trouble. 2 Twisted Crowns. I only have this filled in for 1 prompt right now. I filled it in the titular counting prompt. So in this prompt, you have to read a book with 1 word in the title, a book with 2 words in the title, a book with 3 words in the title, so on and so forth. So I did choose 2 Twisted Crowns for a book with a 3-word title. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to put it in a second prompt yet. 1, because it was really hard to find a second prompt where it fit that I didn't already have a book for. But there are some prompts that I'm probably not even going to touch until after January, such as the ones where you have to read a book and then read another book with a character that matched the author's name or something like that. So there's a lot of books where you have to make chains and where you really have to do a little bit of planning. So I'm probably going to use that book for somewhere in there. So for right now, 2 Twisted Crowns only has 1 spot in the prompts. So going back to the titular counting prompt, for 6 words in the title, it is A Wizard Guide to Defensive Baking. The Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. Okay. I've checked that like 10 times and I always feel like I just have to recheck it whenever I say it. And then for the spot for 10 words in the title, it is Miss Gentle in the Case of the Very Flat Monk. And that's the end of that prompt. So I don't think I'm going to have that hard of a time completing this prompt. All right, moving on to the food pyramid. I only have 1 so far for this prompt. This prompt, you have to read a book with food on the cover, but each book has to be a different section of the food pyramid. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking has a gingerbread cookie on the front of it, so that's going to go in the refined sugars / grains section of the food pyramid. There is a prompt of not so secret prompts. I didn't do HRCYED last year, but apparently last year they had secret prompts that were revealed every month. So there were 12 of them total. This year, she revealed all the prompts ahead of time so that you could read them and fulfill the prompts anytime. One of the prompts for this is to read a book with a first and a last name in the title. So that's where I'm going to stick Emma M. Lyon, or the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 4. That's going to go in the first and last name in a title. And I'm also going to stick Emma M. Lyon in the Traipsing Through the Regions section. This is one where I might have a little bit more of a hard time because I don't read a lot of books that aren't fantasy or that are not set in the United States. So that is something I'm going to have to step outside of and look for books specifically for that. The way I'm going to handle this prompt is 6 regions of the world. So I'm going to try to read however many books are in this prompt, 5 or 6, I don't know, I'd have to look it up. And I'm going to try to space them out around the globe as much as I can. So this one is going to be Europe, London, Emma M. Lyon. Back to The River Has Roots. The second place that I'm putting that in is in the remix prompt. Now, from my understanding, this is not just retellings. This is a remix. So something has to be different. Maybe it's gender bent. I don't really know any other examples of remixes. But I do know that there is a book series, kind of a series, because they're all written by different authors. But it's on Kindle Unlimited. And here, let me just show you the graphic. These are the books that I'm going to read for the remixes. However, because I had one that I read, I decided why not stick it in this slot anyways. So The River Has Roots is not just a retelling of The Cruel Sister, which I'm not familiar with, that story. But apparently, according to Google, it is a remix because in the original story, the sisters are enemies hence the cruel sister. But in The River Has Roots, they are loving towards each other, and the villain is somebody else. So in my mind, that's a retelling. So The River Has Roots is going to be the first spot in the remix prompt. And with that, that's it. That is my July HRCYED. I did forget one thing, really quick. For the side quest. So every month, the first of every month, there is a side quest that is given. And if you complete that side quest, you get to pick between a couple of different things. I'm not going to go into detail here because off the top of my head, I don't really know. But you get to manipulate the board in your favor just a little bit to try to make it a little bit easier, maybe if you're having trouble with a prompt. But there are very specific ways that you can manipulate the board. So I did choose to read a book with a teal cover. It did say teal or turquoise on the cover. So when I read The Wizard Who Kept Himself Suspicious, that counted. And so I did complete that side quest. So I did get a spell prompt. I don't know when I'm going to use that. I'm just going to hold on to that for a little while. August, reading a lot of books to continue or finish series. And of course, I'm looking forward to the second episode of HRCYED in August. With that, I'm going to close out the video. So thank you for sticking around. If you are participating in HRCYED, please let me know in the comments. I would love to talk to you about it. And if you are making social media content on any platform, please let me know. Whether it's HRCYED content or book content, I don't care. I want to follow you. I want to interact and engage with your content. So please let me know in the comments. If you're participating in HRCYED, what is your socials? What was the best book you read in July? And until next time, happy reading.